Oh, I'm sorry. Did I break your concentration?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, what would happen if your mobile phone killed you?
We are tonight's entertainment.
I would rather watch Beautician and the Beast.
People don't forget.
And here we go.
Made for movies.
This is the Made for Movies podcast. I am your host, Eric Russo, and we have a very special episode for you today. A lot lined up. Later in the episode, my co-host, Aaron Wolf, will be joining me with a very special guest to do our official Made for Movies review of Fast and the Furious 9, also known as F9 or Fast 9. So many different names for that movie, but we also have a lot of other things planned for you guys. Of course, we'll do the box office update. So a couple news stories this week, some fan comments, as well as our official review of Loki episode 4. So we're going to start it off as we usually do on this day in history. So today is July 5th. A couple movies came out today, but one in particular I think everyone has a little bit of a special connection to, and that is going to be the 1989 film Weekend at Bernie's, directed by Ted Kotcheff and starring Jonathan Silver, as well as Terry Kaiser as Bernie and Andrew McCarthy as Larry. This movie, one of the best premises, I think, in movie history. I'm surprised they have not remade this yet. Follows two losers who try to pretend that their murdered employer is really alive, leading the hitman to attempt to track him down to finish him off once and for all. Wow. This movie has it all. One of the funniest movies I can remember from my childhood. Holds up incredibly well today. If you have not seen it, definitely watch it. I think this movie has kind of become infamous. A lot of things have spoofed this movie in different TV shows and different movies. How I Met Your Mother did a very funny one with Weekend at Barney's. If you guys have seen that show, you'll know what I'm talking about. But overall, yes, if you have not seen this movie, it's 32 years old now, and well worth your attention. Short and sweet, and one of the funniest movies ever made. From there, we're going to move into the box office update. July 4th weekend, we had some heavy hitters in the house. Leading the way in the first place, once again, Fast 9, the Fast Saga, $24 million. Last week it did $70 million, which is a huge drop of 65%, one of the biggest drops in the entire franchise. So not all good news for the Fast Saga, but still holding on first place. In second place, we have The Boss Baby 2, Family Business. I did not see this movie, but I could probably tell you the exact plot of it. Made $17.3 million this weekend. Third place goes to The Forever Purge with $12.75 million. Pretty good for a movie with a very small budget. In fourth place, we have a very familiar one in The Quiet Place Part 2. And in fifth place, we have The Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard with $3 million. Not much to say on this list. Just to start with Fast 9, though. This franchise is in an interesting spot now, I would say, because it's starting to head in the wrong direction. Now, I know COVID is still playing a factor, but for the most part, movie theaters have returned to normal. Quiet Place Part 2 made about as much as it would have in normal times, and most movies are starting to get back to that point. Now, with the Fast franchise, the last couple movies have been heading in the wrong direction, and it looks like this one will actually sell the fewest tickets in the franchise, obviously adjusted for inflation and everything, but actual people going to see the movie, the total amount of people, will be the lowest in the actual franchise aside from Tokyo Drift. So not all good news, and it'll be interesting to see how they bounce back with the next film and where they go as far as incorporating some of the spin-off characters back into the franchise to hopefully reinvigorate it at the box office. Overall, the Fast franchise is a little over $500 million with this 9th installment. The last one did about $1.2 billion, so we'll see where this one ends up. It's looking to end up a little bit below Fast 5 as the lowest grossing movie since the fourth movie, which made $360 million in 2009. Let's move into some news stories. We're going to be switching it up moving forward. We usually do the top 5 news stories. We'll still be bringing you all the news, but we're going to focus on 3 stories per week just to make sure that we're giving you the best stories possible and spending a little bit more time discussing them. Of course, we'll still have our Why Is This Happening stories of the week when they are available. Luckily, this week it was a little slower, and there was not that many things that made us lose our minds. So that's a positive. But let's do the top 3 stories of the week. Starting at number 3, comes to us from news from Don Cheadle, who is starring in Steven Soderbergh's new film. Says that Steven Soderbergh is thinking about making another Oceans movie. If they did, they would return the original cast members from the original 3 Oceans movie, and it would not tie into Oceans 8. So my thought when I hear this is, why not? I mean, the Ocean movies have some of the best acting talent as far as movies go, and the fact that we potentially could be getting another movie with George Clooney, Matt Damon, and Brad Pitt, especially considering how much they've grown since 2013's Ocean's 13. It's been, almost 10 years since we've seen them together, and I just think that with these types of movies, there's always potential to take these characters and put them in a new scenario. I love Ocean's 11. I think Ocean's 12 is not very good, but it has aged pretty well. And in Ocean's 13, which is very similar to Ocean's 11, I really enjoy as well. So, I mean, Soderbergh doesn't really make bad movies, so why not with this point? I think it's a good idea, especially some of the actors have passed away, like Bernie Mac. You could pay tribute to them as well. There's really no harm in them doing what's probably going to be called Ocean's 14, which should be interesting because that means they're going to have to add some people to the crew for sure. Moving into the top 2 stories of the week, number 2 story is actually a trailer that just dropped. Don't Breathe 2. New trailer just dropped for this movie that comes out August 13th. I am a huge fan of the first Don't Breathe movie. If you have not seen it and you like thrillers and scary movies, it's not too scary, but it is very intense and very well done. Almost sort of weird, different universe, Home Alone type movie where you're kind of rooting for both parties at different points, and really well done with some really cool twists. The new movie, which takes place 8 years after the original, I won't spoil the original if you have not seen it, but it goes in a completely different direction with the characters and where the movie is going to be heading. And I think it looks like they made the right decision. We shall see. But this movie comes out in almost a month's time, so definitely, if you have not seen Don't Breathe, see it. So we are going to be reviewing Don't Breathe 2 on this podcast, hopefully, as long as I can convince Wolf to see it with me. I know he's not a huge horror fan, but I think he'll enjoy this one, which looks like it has a lot of action. And more so, like I said, it's more of a thriller than an actual scary movie. Moving into the top news story of the week, one that I'm really excited about, and I hope it works out well for this series. Dexter, the new revival series, has just recast John Lithgow as the Trinity Killer in the series. No other plot details are given, and it is assumed that it will not be for the entire series. It looks like he only filmed for about a couple days, so I'm assuming it's only for an episode or 2. But the creators have said that they found a very interesting way to bring him back. Oh boy. So I'm very excited for this news. John Lithgow is one of the best parts of the show, Dexter. However, them saying that has me a little bit worried. They said that they have a clever way of bringing him back, but to me, I mean, the only way he can come back is in some sort of flashback or being used in a similar role that Dexter saw his dad, as far as like seeing someone that's not really there, and maybe John Lithgow's character will be the new person helping him. I don't know if I assume that it's going to be some sort of flashback, hopefully. But even so, just the fact that it's going to have ties to that season of Dexter, which I think most people would agree is one of, if not the strongest season of Dexter. And Lithgow is usually considered the best villain that the show ever had. I don't think that there's any chance this will be bad, and I don't think he's coming back to life. I pray that they do not bring him back. That would be one of the worst things ever. We would have to do a top 10 list. The Emperor from Star Wars Episode 9 will be on there, as well as Han from the Fast and the Furious 9, which is coming out later today. Our review is coming up later today, but it's funny. This will be the 9th season of Dexter, so it seems to be the number 9 is just the time to do a crazy resurrection that makes no sense. So hopefully they don't do it, but we shall see. That wraps up all of the news for today. Like I said, not too much news this week, a couple cool stories, and there was nothing too bad. So no why is this happening news story of the week. Let's move into our weekly recommend. Once a week, we will recommend shows, movies, video games, whatever, to you guys so you can get all of the best content where we don't do full reviews, but we can still get as much information to you as possible on what you should be watching. This week, I have a show from HBO called Hacks. Hacks is a new show on HBO. It's a comedy series starring Gene Smart and Hannah Eibender, who I'm not too familiar with. The general plot of the show is it basically explores a dark mentorship that forms between Deborah Vance, who's a legendary Las Vegas comedian, and an entitled outcast 25-year-old. That's a very simple premise of it, but it's really, really well done. It does a great job of really introducing these characters, getting you to care about them quickly. The episodes are a breeze. They're typically 25, 30-minute episodes. The plot of the overall show, there's some twists and turns with it that are really good. One of my favorite parts of the show is it does go after cancel culture, especially people who have been canceled that maybe did not deserve it. So I thought that was really cool that they're kind of addressing that head on because we're seeing it so much right now. But the standout of the show for sure is Gene Smart. Gene Smart is on a roll right now. She was just the mom in Mayor of Easttown, excuse me. And, she's supposed to win all the awards for the show, and she's fantastic in it. Also, we get Shooter McGavin. Christopher McDonald is also in the show in a recurring role. Always very, very fun to see him appear. But if you like comedy, especially some more raunchy, dirty, dark comedy, you will definitely like this show. This was recommended to me originally by TV Ron, one of our correspondents for the show. And he was dead on with this. It's a great show. I think you'll see this picking up a lot of awards this year, and hopefully it looks like it has a lot of ability to continue on for at least a few years. So really looking forward to see what they do moving forward. Let's move into a couple fan comments and questions that were sent in to us by our audience. Again, if you want to be featured on our podcast, all you have to do is send us a message on social media, or you can email us at madeformoviepodcast@gmail.com. We're going to focus on two this week, both related to the Fast and the Furious franchise. The first one is sent in to us from Kung Fu Larry 87. He writes in that after Fast and the Furious 9 opened at number 1 at the box office and has continued to be one of the biggest movie franchises around, do we think that it has surpassed Star Wars as the number 1 movie franchise in the world? Wow, that's a loaded question for sure, and I think that's a list that we will definitely dive into at some point. It comes down to a couple things. What are we saying is the reason for being number 1, right? So if it's movie quality, is it box office, or is it like a combination of the two? For me personally, it's definitely up there, considering now, so the Fast and the Furious franchise has made 10 movies, including the spin-offs and everything. It has made $6.3 billion worldwide. That's an average of $639 million per movie. For the most part, most of the movies are decent, pretty well received critically and by the fans. For me, it's a really tough call. I would say the franchises that are definitely still ahead of it, Star Wars is for sure still a bigger movie franchise than the Fast and the Furious. So Star Wars is 12 movies, including spinoffs, $10.3 billion. That's an average of $859 million, so almost $200 million more per movie. And that number will continue to go up. Star Wars episode movies will most likely always be billion-dollar grossers. The Fast and the Furious movies are on a downward trend. This newest one is not even going to hit the average of $639 million. So from there, you have some other things too. So Marvel Cinematic Universe, that's debatable if you're going to count that as a franchise. But $22.5 billion, 23 movies, an average of $982 million, and that number is going up and up and up and up and up. So that's the closest thing we have to a billion-dollar average. I would probably say Marvel, if anything, has passed Star Wars as the biggest franchise. Most Marvel movies that come out are going to make a lot of money, whereas Star Wars, some of the spinoffs have not done that well. So As far as consistency, as far as the quality of the films, critically, commercially, and from the fans, I would put the Marvel Cinematic Universe ahead of both. From there, I mean, you have the Spider-Man franchise, 9 movies, $7.2 billion, so that's still ahead of Fast and the Furious. Fast and the Furious is going to be around for a while. I don't know if it'll have the longevity of a Star Wars, 40 or 50 years. But I would say it's in the top 5 for sure. We're going to do another list. One other shout out will be the Harry Potter movies. With the spinoffs, there's 10 of those, $9.2 billion, mostly critically loved for all of them except for a couple of the spinoffs. But still, $924 million per movie is insane. Of course, you have Jurassic Park. That's actually averaging $1 billion per movie. So that's the number one for average. But they've only made 5 Jurassic Park movies. So we're going to get way more in the end. I would assume when it's all said and done, there will be 15 to 20 Fast and the Furious movies, which probably will be number 2 all time as far as total movies. You also have James Bond, which, there's 26 James Bonds, but they're really not connected. The newer ones are like the last 4 or 5, but, some of the older James Bond movies have no affiliation with the newer ones. So is that a franchise? If that's a franchise, you almost have to count Batman. So that's where it starts to get a little dicey for me. But as far as one continuity, I would definitely say Fast and the Furious is in the top 5. I'm really curious to see how the next one does, because COVID should be completely cleared up by then. If the money starts to go down, I think we'll definitely see the final one, be one of the better grossing ones because they can sell it as the last one. But from there, I don't know how much more juice the franchise will have without Vin Diesel and some of the other main characters probably not doing any more of these movies after a certain point, I would assume anyway. But great question sent in to us once again, Kung Fu Larry 87. Our next question actually comes from the Movie Mania pod. Adam Thailand asked me this question. I thought it would be a good topic to discuss. He asked, do I think if The Rock will return to the main Fast and the Furious franchise, or will he only continue to do the spinoffs? We talked a little bit about this last week with the beef between The Rock and Vin Diesel. So if I had to predict what's going to happen, I would say that this movie did not make nearly as much money as they had hoped, almost $600 million less than the previous and less than Hobbs and Shaw, the spinoff with The Rock. So I think what will happen is for the 10th one, the next one, they will bring back Jason Statham, and they will still not bring The Rock back. They'll bring Statham back because he has a connection to Han. From there, I think the movie still will not do that great at the box office compared to a couple of the previous ones. And at that point, I think everyone's going to have to put their ego in check and bring The Rock back for the finale. I think it would be super disappointing if they can't work this out to get arguably the third most important character in the entire franchise behind Vin Diesel and Paul Walker to return for the finale. I think they owe it to the fans to make that happen and to make the last one the biggest one possible and make sure that all the major players are there. But with that, we have egos involved. The Rock does not need the Fast and the Furious franchise. They need him more than he needs them at this point. So he may just not do it out of spite at this point. He may not want to help Vin Diesel out. But money talks, and I think that they will work this out, at least in a small cameo-type appearance. If they don't find a way to get The Rock and John Cena in a scene together, that would also be a huge missed opportunity and just very, very funny interactions between those two. I'm sure they really don't seem to like each other, but they play friendly anyway. So that's something I personally would like to see, but really appreciate that question. Again, if you guys want to be featured, all you have to do is just send us your questions, send us your comments. You can send us your reviews on the stuff that we're reviewing, and we will read the best ones every single Monday. So from there, we move into our 2 reviews of the week. We're going to start with Loki. So we've been reviewing Loki week to week. So this week's Loki is Loki episode 4, titled The Nexus Event. So once again, if you have not seen Loki at this point, all I can say spoiler free is you should be watching it. If you are a fan of the MCU, it's in our opinion probably so far the best MCU show, and I think everyone would like it, even if you don't really like the MCU. But you like some of the Marvel movies, or you like the character of Loki, I think you'll get a lot of enjoyment out of this. There's not too much connective tissue to the other movies where you'd be totally lost. It is its own independent story, while also hopefully laying the foundation for a ton of Marvel stuff coming up. That's been, my biggest issue with these shows, is that they tend to seem like they're not going to matter, and that if I skipped all of them, I could watch the movies and not miss a beat, which I totally understand. The audience that watches the movies is such a larger audience than the ones watching the TV shows, so you don't want to alienate your people that are paying actual money to go see these things. So it does make sense. However, I do think it would be interesting if they could make them seem a little more important. So we shall see with 2 episodes left if Loki does that. Let's move into this review, though. I personally thought episode 4 was the strongest episode in the series so far. Especially, one of my issues with episode 3 was that it seemed like a filler episode, but as always, you have to kind of see what comes after it. And, at the end of the day, everything they did in episode 3 has payoff in episode 4. So while not the most interesting episode 3 I'm referring to, it really does kind of help put this one in a different perspective, and I don't think this episode would have been nearly as good without the interactions between Loki and Sylvie in episode 3. But overall, this episode had a lot going on. A few things in particular I liked. We do get the interaction between Loki and Mobius, as far as Loki telling Mobius that everyone's a variant. I thought this was really well done by Owen Wilson, who was sorely missed last week. I thought that was one of the biggest issues I had with last week, was he was not in it at all, and I just think he brings like an energy and life to the show that just really makes everything go a lot smoother, and I think it brings out the best in Loki as well. Then we also get in this episode, Mobius actually gets deleted, basically, and when this first happened, It definitely got me for a second. Again, Owen Wilson really sells this moment that for a second I thought maybe this was the end to his character, which would have been totally shocking and heartbreaking. By the end of the episode, we'll get something that definitely has me to believe that he is 100% alive and healthy, and hopefully we get a good payoff. Again, he mentions the jet ski in this episode, and I am just so ready for that payoff. I think it's going to be one of the best moments in MCU history, with him riding a jet ski heroically at the end of this season. If it does not happen, I will be very, very upset. But in all seriousness, from there, we move into the other main thing that happens this week, which is we get Sylvie and Loki coming before the Timekeepers. To me, this is where the episode really kicks into another gear. Typically with this show, it's been ending a little bit lackluster week to week, where I want to see more, right? But for this, they definitely could have ended the episode with Loki and Sylvie appearing right before the Timekeepers and left it on that cliffhanger. The fact that we got the entire interaction with the Timekeepers, as well as much more, made me very happy and very excited for where the show's going to go this upcoming week. But we find out that the Timekeepers are essentially robots, which okay, that was an interesting idea. I need to see where it goes from here. I'm not the biggest fan of that, because I thought the Timekeepers were very, very interesting characters, but now it appears that, well, they're working for somebody else, or someone was in control of them, which raises a lot of questions I have just as far as Ravonna goes, because did she know that they were robots? Does she know who she's working for? She didn't seem to be too surprised that they were robots. So very interesting. A couple ways this could go. My fear is that Loki is somehow the one that's like running the Timekeepers, and now he's trying to get rid of all the other Lokis. I think it's very possible. I hope that's not where they go, because I think it really ruins some of the moments that we've seen so far. My hope is that this leads to a bigger villain like Kang. I think that would be super awesome if they bring him in this way and he's the one behind the Timekeepers. It would make a ton of sense, and we do know that Kang has been cast in Ant-Man 4, or is it Ant-Man 3? Ant-Man 3, excuse me. So it does make a lot of sense for them to incorporate him, but we shall see. Again, I don't know how much these shows are going to be important to the overall narrative, and that would be the first major thing that happens in one of these shows for sure. So from there, we move into the end of the episode. So not only does Ravonna kill Owen Wilson's character, Mobius, she also appears to kill Loki with that same staff that makes people evaporate. From here, this was a shocking moment, but we all understand that there is no way that Loki is 100% dead. That would be just insanity. They've tried many times to kill him, and he will not die. But it still made for a nice, shocking moment, nonetheless. And again, I thought we were going to have to wait till next week to see where this story is going to go, but we get, for the first time, by the way, we get a post-credit tease, amazingly, where Loki wakes up in what appears to be destroyed New York City, possibly, which I have a lot of questions about in general. But he gets woken up by multiple other Lokis, including an alligator Loki. So what this makes me believe is that Mobius is also in his own world with a bunch of other Mobiuses, which will be absolutely amazing if we can get that with Owen Wilson playing all sorts of different characters. I think that would be incredible. But a couple points on this. So as far as where they are, if that is New York, and possibly this is some sort of alternate New York where Loki did beat the Avengers and he took over the world, that would be really cool. It's obviously not on the main timeline, so it could be some sort of like limbo scenario as well. But I'm most interested in it being like this post-apocalyptic Loki won over the Avengers, New York City. I think that has the most potential. But yeah, we shall see where we go from here. I'm really, really excited for the show. Only 2 episodes left. My biggest issue with the previous 2 shows was the 5th episode, the one before the finales, seemed to be, they didn't really cover much. It would like go back in time or show flashbacks. So I'm hoping we can keep this plot moving forward, and I'm hoping that the finale is not just 45 minutes of mindless action. I hope it continues to tell this incredible story that they've built up, and I have a good feeling about it so far. But I know Wolf's loving the show. He wasn't on this week to talk about it, but we will be back next week to talk about Loki episode 5, and that about wraps it up. If you guys have any questions, comments, what you think of the show so far, please send them to us, and we will read them next week. We're going to take a little break. When we come back, Wolf will be joining me with a very special guest for our official review of Fast and the Furious 9.
All right, we are back. Thank you guys for sticking with us here. We have a very special guest on a very special segment here. We are going to be reviewing F9, the 9th film in the Fast and Furious universe, directed by Justin Lin, starring, of course, the venerable Vin Diesel, our favorite person. With me, of course, Mr. Russo, as always, and a special guest, the one and only Taco D'Onofrio. He has done enough comments and is a good enough friend of mine. He's the guy with the Taco Bell wedding cake, for Christ's sake. That's the funniest, best thing I've ever seen in my goddamn life. Thank you, Jeff, for that. But Jeff, welcome to the podcast, buddy. Glad to have you here.
Thank you, guys. This is a tremendous honor. And I usually bring up this venerable franchise in my class when I'm making fun of all of my high school students for all of the Marvel movies that they will go see. To self-deprecate, I will see, while you guys will go see Doctor Strange 12, you can see me at the theater midnight for, the 12th Fast and the Furious film.
Oh, it's great. Yeah, Jeff and I have been, number one, he's been making fun of me for having Tokyo Drift be my favorite Fast and Furious movie since Tokyo Drift came out.
It's grown on me now.
So when there was only three to choose from, that was still my number one. And we actually went to the theater on opening night and saw 5, 6, and 7 together. So we've been going to see these movies for quite some time. And Jeff is one of the biggest Fast and Furious fans ever, and definitely a good resource and knowledgeable about these movies to have on. So thanks for having us, buddy, or thanks for being with us, buddy. We appreciate it. Russo, let's run through our review. What do we got starting off here?
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get into the review, I'll just get your guys' thoughts on just your expectations going into this movie, specifically related to the last Fast 8 movie, not so much Hobbs and Shaw. Wolf, I'll start with you.
Yeah, my expectations going into this were literally none whatsoever, and it's because Statham and The Rock did branch off. So knowing that they weren't going to be in it, knowing how Vin Diesel is the most annoying person in the world right now, I think he's been on like 6 consecutive Wolf's Why Is This Happening news stories of the week. So I literally went in with like, if it is half as good as Fate of the Furious, which is the movie that preceded it, it'll be worth the $9.99. It took me to get into the theater that day. So basically, that's where I went in with it.
Jeff, how about you?
So while I was eager to see it, and I checked in my emails and I realized this is the first time I had been in the theaters since Hobbs and Shaw. While I was anticipating it, I did have concerns. So I would say my expectations were low because there were 6 things that I was worried about. And I'll run through these quickly, and we'll talk later about, how did I feel? How did they handle them? So number 1, I was concerned about how is Dom going to be our hero if he now has a child at home from the last movie, since that is what is supposedly keeping Brian off the screen. Number 2, where is Brian? We had a movie where, he was not on screen, and that was handled well, but can they do that again? Third concern, John Cena is obviously being introduced. We know from the previews he's Dom's brother. We've never heard about him before. So I was a little worried, like, how is he going to be forced in? Number 4, I was not happy to see that Cardi B was going to have some role. How big was that going to be? Is she a permanent member of the team? That was a concern. Number 5 was, how are they going to up the ante? 8 was, I felt kind of a step back for me. I didn't like it as much as the previous 2. So, how are they going to right the ship? And finally, we know Han's coming back. They have advertised this. They're making it a big deal. They're like, yeah, he was totally dead, but he's back. So how are they going to handle that? So those were 6 very clear concerns I had as a person who was a fan of the franchise and going to see this no matter what.
Good stuff. Yeah. All valid concerns, I would say. For me, I'm right there with you, Wolf. I actually really liked Fate of the Furious, more so than I thought, and I have very low expectations going in. We all know how our Hobbs and Shaw experience went. Not the best movie experience of my life, I will say that. But just from the trailers, this is the first Fast movie that when I saw the trailer, I just thought it didn't look good. There were 3 trailers for this, and it seemed like they gave away the entire movie, and it turns out, spoiler alert, it did. But that's the thing for me. If you can't hook me in on a 3-minute trailer, especially with how many action beats the trailer used, it's never going to be a great recipe, and I do think that the presence of The Rock and Jason Statham could have helped this movie tremendously. And had they never made Hobbs and Shaw, I would have much rather seen them just combined the 2 worlds, but egos get in the way as per usual. But yeah, that's where I was at. I expected this to be really bad heading in, but we'll go into general thoughts. Wolf, what are your general thoughts? Fast 9, F9, the Fast Saga.
So I keep kind of going into this realm. I was shaking my head many times during the movie because of how unrealistic it was. But then I remembered, like, this is completely fake. I would even classify Fast and the Furious as not an action movie, but a science fiction movie because of how unrealistic most of the things are. So that's where I would put this one 100%. I will give it a little bit more credit once I got that out of my head of the unrealistic aspect of it. So I actually didn't mind it as much as I hated Hobbs and Shaw, which, again, is the only movie I've ever walked out of a theater on. This one, I stayed through the end. It was a little bit too long for me. I thought a lot of the stuff they did to improve on the backstory of everybody. Could have left a little bit up to the audience, and therefore made it a little bit shorter. But it has its funny parts. It obviously has decent action, as most of these movies do. And some of the depth of the story between, Cena and Vin Diesel is okay, but their acting, both of them, I couldn't take anything Cena said seriously. And then Vin Diesel, every time he was looking at me with his eyes closed, I like balled up my fist in anger. So that side of it detracted a lot from the movie for me, but overall, it wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen. Still not a good movie in my eyes, but it wasn't as bad as I thought after the first 20 minutes. I could say that.
Fair enough. And Jeff, we'll move to you.
The only way in which I will agree with you, Aaron, is that in the first 30 minutes, not having seen this whole group on screen for a couple years, not seeing a lot of action movies recently, in the first 30 minutes, it is kind of a jolt where you're like, oh my God, like this is preposterous. But what they're doing is they are giving you a climax of any other fast movie in the first 30 minutes. Now, yes, they did show too much in the trailer. Both of the major set pieces, I thought, were in the trailer, and that was not great. But this is a involving and ever-improving franchise, and it is self-aware. All the stuff where you have Tyrese being like, hey, how come I didn't get shot? How come I don't ever get shot? How come I lived? That is the film acknowledging, like, okay, maybe you went into this film sober. Maybe you forgot how we do this. Now buckle up, just accept it, and enjoy the ride. So I'll admit, exactly in the first 30 minutes, I was preoccupied with why is Dom doing something so risky when he's got a baby at home now? Why is he going to endanger Letty's life? But, by the middle of the movie, I'm looking forward to what I know they're going to give me, and I have fully bought in at that point. But my overall spoiler-free thought about the movie is just that this is a franchise that gives you what you want as a fan, and they have developed a huge fan base globally. The most diverse audience for any kind of film in the U.S., abroad. They print their own money, but they don't rest on their laurels, and they're giving you more than you need. They could have just shoved John Cena down our throats and said, accept it, Dom's got a brother. I thought the backstory was pretty well developed for the 9th or 10th movie in a franchise. I think Vin Diesel in creating this monster here that will never end, he is working harder than he needs to, and they are trying to deal with all the plot holes and trying to make it make sense enough, and I appreciate that.
Good stuff. Yeah, I know a lot of the fans probably like this movie. I, unfortunately, was not one of them. To me, this is one of the worst movies I have ever seen. And that's coming from someone who likes the franchise. But at the end of the day, if you need 45 minutes of flashback exposition to make your plot make sense in the 9th movie in a franchise that has never had flashbacks, you probably shouldn't have that in your story at this point. That's where I'm at with the flashbacks. But yeah, I don't want to bash the movie too much. I almost walked out. I would say the Cardi B scene, not to get into spoilers, her appearance and her scene was the worst scene in cinematic film history, and it was actually the closest I came to walking out of the movie. Had we not had to do the podcast, I probably would have walked out. So for me, Fast peaks with Fast 5. It's one of the greatest action movies ever made, and somewhere along the line, they lost that heart and soul of what made that movie great, watching real people, real stakes, not superheroes. And to your point, the thing I liked the least about this movie was the kind of on the nose, oh, are we invincible dialogue that Tyrese had going. I can't get on board with it. To me, it felt like it was very insulting to the audience when he has bullet holes in his shirt and he has not a scratch on him. It's just not for me at this point, which is totally fine. I kind of had that feeling with Hobbs and Shaw, which I thought Hobbs and Shaw was going to be one of the best Fast movies based off the cast. And they're just going in a different direction, and it's not the direction that I like, unfortunately. But we will move into scores. Wolf, what are you going to score this out of 10?
Yeah, I'm going to be pretty generous with my score here. I'm going to go with a 4 out of 10. If it was shorter, I might bump that up to a 5. But overall, because of the main reason is what you just said, Tyrese making fun of the fact that yes, that no one dies and people are now coming back to life. That ended it for me right there. I was like, okay, they're parodying themselves like an episode of Family Guy. Once that truck fell, I was like, oh my god, they just killed Tyrese. This is the best movie of all time. No, it didn't. So it's like, okay, I guess only 30 minutes in, maybe I'll get lucky, but that's kind of where I landed on it.
Fair enough. Jeff, we'll move to you.
So on a scale of 0 to 10, I'm not comparing this to anything outside the Fast and Furious franchise. It's been 20 years, and they have given us 10 movies in that time. They've created a genre of their own. So I'm not comparing it to Citizen Kane. I'm not comparing it to Godfather 2. And I think you guys have had very generous scores overall in the films that you guys have reviewed on this podcast. So I don't think I am out of line by saying among Fast and Furious movies, it's not in my top 3, but I'm going to give it a 9. I give it a 9 out of 10 because I think that they are, as I said before, working harder than they need to. They are delivering a better product. They're always looking to improve. I think it's better than 8, but it's still, not in the top 3. But yes, I also have it at 9 because it answered all 6 of my concerns. So let me quickly go through those. So number 1, I was concerned about Dom having a kid. The only reason he gets involved is it's his brother who's the bad guy, right? So he wants to protect his crew from them. Where is Brian? They handled it well. Mia's involved. Okay, that's a stretch, but it's her brother as well. Handled out of sight. Classy. John Cena. I liked the backstory. I liked the flashbacks. I thought the actors were all good there. So exceeded all my expectations there. Cardi B, I was so worried about this. She ends up being less than a minute. We get so much more Helen Mirren than we do Cardi B. So I'm happy with that.
That's a good... I'll take that trade any day of the week. 100%.
And as for how did they up the ante? Well, before Fast 8, there were jokes like, what kind of vehicles are left? A submarine? And they did that, and it's not that memorable. But they gave us what we wanted. We wanted them to go to space, and they did it. Was it, a little hokey? Yeah, sure. But they went to space. They gave us what we wanted, and I think they did a better job than they needed to. So finally, the Han issue, this is maybe like the weakest in terms of how did they deal with a concern of mine, but he's back. We're happy about it. They had to plug in a K-pop actress for the global appeal, and that's all cool. It keeps Mr. Nobody in the story. I'm fine with it. I'm a super fan. I'll swallow that. At least they did a better job with the John Cena part of it and tried to work that in.
Sure. Good stuff. Yeah, so for me, I'm going to be super generous with it as well. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10. I was going to go 1, but I did like the second half a little bit more. I did like the final scene, not even the final scene, the final shot of the movie, as well as the post-credit scene intrigued me somewhat. So it wasn't a total loss, but as far as the regular Fast and the Furious movies, this is my least favorite one. No secret there, but it was between this and 2. Too Fast, Too Furious, but the fact that does have Paul Walker edges this slightly just for the nostalgia of it. But yeah, that's where I'm at with it. I'm not going to beat a dead horse. We'll get into some specifics here in a second. But yeah, that's where we're at. 3.5 out of 10 from the Made for Movies crew, 9 out of 10 from Jeff. Let's jump into spoilers. If you have not seen Fast 9, don't want anything spoiled, go watch the trailer and it'll be spoiled for you anyway. But Wolf, Jeff, any specific scenes you guys wanted to discuss before we wrap this thing up?
The main thing I wanted to talk about was that Groot actually made an appearance in this movie. It's when Dom is fighting a million soldiers in that tunnel and then falls to his death but doesn't die. He's Groot. It's amazing. He's hulking out, literally like killing one after the other. So I laughed. I was the loudest person in that theater by a mile
Nice.
because I was also drinking a little bit to try to get through it. Thanks to AMC, they have booze. But yeah, the other people in the theater were laughing at me, laughing at this scene because they were like, "Why is he laughing so much?" I was like, "Because it's fucking Groot." Like, I don't know what else to say. And then I have to shout out the mid-credit scene with Jason Statham and Han, played by Sung Kang, great actor. He's one of my favorites. You guys hear that quite a lot as well. But I'm hopeful that they'll focus in on those two for possibly with F10. I don't know if Statham and Vin Diesel have as much beef as The Rock and Vin Diesel, but it'd be pretty cool to get Statham back in the Fast side of things for the last two movies possibly. So those are just two things I wanted to call out. I thought were the one hilarious, but also a pretty good action scene overall, and then the ending for hopefully some spoilers in the future.
Good stuff. Jeff, anything from you?
I would say when Vin Diesel, when he does like pull the chains and bring down the whole building, as Aaron was talking about, that was one of my least favorite scenes. I had just really gotten into the film, and then it's like, wait, why is he expecting to die here, but not when he goes island hopping? I'm like, dude, there's not even another building on the other side. So, but I would say maybe my favorite set piece was when they had the truck that Ramsey was driving in Edinburgh. I liked that because I didn't feel like that was spoiled in the trailers. We certainly knew about some big truck at the end that felt like we'd already seen that in 5, and the island hopping, and they had the plane thing. That was all spoiled in the trailer, but I thought the stuff where they're driving around with the bad guys in the back in the middle part of the movie, I thought that was strong. I like that. And if I'm going to nitpick anything in this movie, it's maybe the reliance on the magnets now. So if they, if these guys are superheroes, I guess magnets are their thing now. And I can, and I'm sure they'll be conspicuously absent as a Team Toretto technology in the next two films. I'm sure we'll just never hear about it again.
I understand.
That's fair. For me, standout scene, like I said, I thought the usage of Paul Walker's car to represent Paul Walker pulling up to the barbecue was well done, and I'm glad they did not use his brother, although I'm fairly certain that he will appear in the final movie as his brother or CGI. I can't imagine that they can get away with doing these sort of teases for 2 more movies of where is Paul Walker.
Where is he?
Yeah, so I would sense that he will definitely at least appear in the sense that he did at the end of 7, which I absolutely hope I am wrong about. But for me, the most ridiculous part of the movie was Han's return, Han's explanation about that it was basically a magic trick, and they should have just not said anything, and I think we all would have been okay with them not really going into full explanation. He could have also used, I know Nick Fury used the, what's it called, in the middle of the road to escape out through.
Yeah, so you're referencing a scene in Captain America, The Winter Soldier,
Yes.
where he cuts through the bottom of a street.
Let's do it.
Slips into the sewer. That would have been 1 billion times better than what was told.
Than a magic trick.
Agree with you.
My biggest issue, though, was he's covered in blood. Like, he's got cuts all over him. And then a second later, he's standing next to Kurt Russell, clearly 15 years older, and
yes.
and has not one scratch on him, and like he's eating potato chips, which is like his thing, I know, but the whole thing it disgusted me to a point. There was no returning. And like I said, I liked Han in this movie. I think he's one of the better parts of the movie as far as just his acting. So I would have rather them not address it at all. But it's amazing these people can't come up with a better idea than this. This goes back to Star Wars. If you're gonna bring someone back, like, just justify it for me. But last thing on these movies, for me, I would never compare it to Citizen Kane or The Godfather. I'm always judging fast movies based off, unfortunately, other fast movies, but also I'm a huge fan of the Mission Impossible series and where that's gone. Very, very similar to the Fast saga as far as you have a team. To me, those movies earn their stunts, and that's where this one kind of differs. It's just got to the point of, like, ridiculousness with the space and stuff like that. So I personally didn't want them to go to space. I know a lot of people did, but I knew it was also coming. So no surprise there. But yeah, I was a little frustrated they teased Tyrese and Ludacris dying for like 2 minutes and then decided not to do anything with that whatsoever. But that's all I got on this movie. Let's get your guys' top 3 fast movies and your least favorite, and we'll wrap this thing up.
Okay, I'm going to go first. It's a pretty well-known fact on the Made for Movies podcast. My favorite Fast and Furious movie is The Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift, 2006, who, by the way, Lucas Black and some of the other funny characters like Bow Wow do make an appearance in F9. So definitely a highlight, a little bit of humor there. And Lucas Black, while only 3 years older than me, looks 60 years older than me, and I found that to be hilarious. Love that guy. We were in high school at the same time, fun fact. But yeah, number 1 is Tokyo Drift. Number 2 would probably be Fast 5. It is a fantastic movie, kind of taking it to that next level for these guys who just used to be street racers, and definitely better than number 4, which I don't even remember a single scene from at this point because it's so bad I haven't watched it ever again. And then I'd have to go with 7 because of the Paul Walker connection, and we lost him that year. I did cry in the theater when they put the 4 Paul on the screen at the end of that movie. So that was a rough one, but yeah, those are my top 3. How about Jeff?
All right, so I chose these based on the combination of how's the plot and what's the memorable set piece. For a number of these movies, you instantly think of a certain scene, and for the weaker ones, you don't. So in first place, I have Fast 7 because of Paul Walker, of course, but also the Abu Dhabi scene. I mean, that is huge. After that, I go with 6 with the world's never-ending runway. And
that's why I don't like 6, by the way. Too unrealistic.
Yeah, and then after that, I have 5. I think most people would have 5 in the number 2 spot or the number 1 spot. I can't argue with that. If you ask me tomorrow, I'd probably reverse 5 and 6. But those 3 are in a tier clear above everything else for me.
Nice. Yeah, for me, number 3 spot would go to Fate of the Furious, specifically for The Rock and Jason Statham. Thought they did a great job in that. From there, number 2 favorite will be the original. I think it holds up very well on a small budget, has aged very well. The acting is among the better in the series. And then from number 1, I've already given it away, but Fast 5 is my number 1 movie. I think it's the only Fast movie that holds up. If someone who didn't watch these movies just wanted to watch like a heist movie, they could watch that, not be lost. It's kind of the Avengers of the Fast franchise, and a happy accident that they were able to bring everyone together because Vin Diesel did not want to do those first couple sequels. So they had to kind of use secondary characters to run the second and third movies, which gave them the ability to do this team-up movie eventually, which I think is pretty cool that they did it, not like a Marvel or a DC. It kind of just came together organically. But that's all I got. You guys got anything else?
All good here.
Good stuff.
All I'll say is I will ride or die for this as long as they don't start to use time travel as a crutch. I think when that becomes a plot point, I think that's where it's jumped the shark for me. So I hope I don't regret it when that becomes how they resolve everything in the next movie.
Well, Justin Lin listens to our podcast, so he'll definitely take note of that, buddy, for sure.
Awesome.
But Jeffrey, thank you for being on, bud.
It was a privilege. Thank you.
Your comments and insights into our thoughts and reviews is always welcome, and we'll continue to shout you out on the podcast, and we'll see you for F10. I'm just moving along my keyboard here. We'll have you back.
Thanks, guys.
Good stuff. All right, guys, we will see you next week. Bye.
See ya.
Made for movies.